first. You are not audible right
now. Thank you for reminding, madam. So let me first share my screen. If it is visible, I'll be just reading. Thank you, Professor Aunuk Jahan, and thank you, my fellow panelists, Professor Jamil Ahmed and Professor Habibur Jaman, and all those who are listening. In this evening, since 20 minutes is very precious time, I'll go over straight to my topic. I said 4 or 5 issues to talk about. I will not talk about university in general, but I will address 2 kinds of universities. First, the universities as we have known them since Bologna or since the University of Paris in the 12th century, which I can call, without fear of much disagreement, humanist scientist university, and a new kind of university is now emerging already, which I have gathered from literature as managerial marketizing university. The market is already here. And predicting is difficult, particularly about the future, you know, but there are many kinds of futures. One future is what we call the near future, which is already here. And there is a long future which never ends. The future lives forever, as Louis Althusser once named his autobiography. And so I will now come to the present, why this marketing managerial university is emerging and what is the imperative of accumulation under late capitalism. This what is usually known as globalization now. But the last point I would like to emphasize is that the divide between the colonizer and the colonized in the university system is not over yet. And I borrowed the title from Dad to Worse. It's a bad pun in English, but I translated this from French, who say du père au pire, from father to the worse. So it puns with English bad to worse. This is what, in my opinion, happening to the university. So let's proceed. How did it begin? I refer to a Canadian-American professor, Bill Readings, who died in 1994. His book, The University in Ruins, was published by Harvard University Press in 1996, posthumous. He uses the word about university, a paraphrasing on Jean-Francois Lyotard, who said postmodern university. He uses the word post-historical university. History is over. I prefer the term, which I have not written here. I call it posthumous university. The university already is dead. Just remember, whatever has happened to Plato's Academy, it could not be revived by the French Academy or English Royal Academy or the Swedish Academy, despite their monopoly of a Nobel Prize. So Academy is dead. The Baghdad Nizamiya Madrasa is dead. And I argue that the University of Paris or Bologna process is already dead. We are guarding a corpse, which is called the Western University. What is now being born on its corpse is called Americanization. So Americanization is actually a dead body of the old university. So let me read from his works. He says, on a certain notion of the university, Bill Readings focused his gaze, which has been widely exported throughout the world and whose current mutation seems likely to continue to frame the terms of transnational discussion, as has been referred to by Professor Habibur Jaman's paper. And Readings names the process Americanization not simply as a case of US cultural hegemony, but more emphatically as a synonym for globalization, quote unquote, in order to recognize that, quote, globalization is not a neutral process in which Washington and Dakar participate equally. You can put Dhaka also here without much loss of energy. What is the reason behind this? I'm going quickly over. One argument of Bill Readings is that the nation state is already in decline. So the autonomy of the university, which was associated with the autonomy, self-determination of the nation state, is already dead. For its part, Reading argues, the university is becoming a transnational bureaucratic corporation, either tied to the transnational instances of government, such as the European Union, or functioning independently by analogy with a transnational corporation. By analogy, it is by chaos. And because economic globalization brings with it the relative decline of the nation state as the prime instance of reproduction of capital around the world. The current crisis of the university in the West, according to Bill Readings, proceeds from a shift in its social role and internal systems, one which means that the centrality of the traditional humanistic disciplines to the life of the university is no longer assured. So what is the bureaucratic corporation about? This is also corroborated by a UNESCO study published in 1993 by a man by name, Latin American it sounds, or Spanish, Alfonso Borrero Cabal. He says, the move of the university towards the status of a bureaucratic corporation is also attested by Alfonso Borrero Cabal, whose focal point of analysis is administration, an euphemism for bureaucracy, rather than teaching or research as the central function of the university. He figures the university's tasks in terms of a generalized logic of accountability, quote unquote, in which the university must pursue excellence in all aspects of its functioning. When Dhaka University was founded, it was not founded for kindness' sake, let me remind you, not as a university in excellence. It was founded with three words: teaching university, a residential university, as a unitary university. All these are lost, and we are revising history. Now I begin the next section. Where does all this originate in? They began in the crisis of profitability. If you permit me to use Karl Marx, I would say it is in the rate, a fall in the rate of profit that became manifest by the middle of the 1960s after the post-war expansion of the so-called golden era. Since 1945, I quote from another man called Philip Coombs, who published a book called The World Crisis in Education from Oxford University Press in 1985. All countries have undergone fantastically swift environmental changes brought about by a number of concurrent worldwide revolutions in science and technology, in economic and political affairs, as well as in demographic and social structures. So what happened? Educational systems have also grown and changed more rapidly than ever before, but they have adapted all too slowly in relation to the faster pace of events on the move all around them. So Coombs continues, the consequent disparity taking many forms between educational systems and their environments is the essence of the worldwide crisis in education. This is euphemism. Simply supply and demand were not matching. Aspirations rose to a high level, but the economy were not able to create enough jobs in the great long downturn that began around 1965. Ever since the late 1960s, the situation has had and will continue to have, as far ahead as the mind's eye can see, all the attributes of a continuing crisis. Mind you, my audience, that this is not a Marxist man speaking. This is a quite liberal man, a consultant for the World Bank, who is saying this. So what they are now prescribing for the colonized people's university, that you do not need genius. Mediocrity will be enough for you. This is the divide that we are denying when we talk of the global university. We are talking of the university, and you know this. If an educational system clings to conventional practices, this is Coombs still continuing to speak, merely because they are traditional, if it lashes itself to inherited dogmas to stay afloat in a sea of uncertainty, if it invests folklore with the dignity of science, he says, and exalts inertia to the plane of first principles, that system is a satire on education itself. So what is their critique of the third world countries who are trying to develop from 1950 to 1970? They were saying that we also want to experience what Marshall Plan did in Western Europe, but they were denied that. Despite all the models from Rostow, Lewis, and others, all development theories then were revised at the end of the 1960s. So they were started to criticize the system of education in the third world, saying that from the standpoint of society, resources invested in perpetuating such a system are misused resources. Misused because a high proportion of its students will emerge ill-fitted to serve, well, either themselves or their society. This is euphemism for the fact that they will not get a job. So they could be exported to the Western world, but they will not accept them. They started to constrict their license on free immigration. They had all, this is the main critique, they had helped create elite cadres to run new governmental ministries and to work in the small urban modern sector of the economy, but they were ill-suited to develop the vast human and other resources of the traditional rural sector, where most of the people still lived. In fact, they deprived rural areas of their best potential developmental leaders by draining bright and ambitious young people away from the countryside to the cities. This is the critique, neoliberal critics is originating here. You will see. It is called blaming the victim. So what is the new situation? It's called educated unemployment. So they want unemployment, but not educated unemployment. So their argument, interestingly, they co-opted the theory of deschooling society. It is co-opted, I would say, because this was not even LHS original proposition, but it has been co-opted by World Bank and others. You will see this. The rapidly increasing output of educational systems everywhere, particularly at the secondary and post-secondary levels, finally caught up with backlog of post-war and post-independence manpower demands and began to outstrip the creation of new jobs by the economy. European and North American nations, which earlier welcomed educated talents from the colonial world, began stiffening immigration restrictions and in some instances expelled guest workers, even imposed measures to stem the rapidly increasing flow of foreign students. So the experience of stagflation affected education in the following ways: by contracting employment openings for new graduates, both at home and abroad, and by raising mischief with educational costs and budgets. We know it is unprecedented in world history that the students will be paying for their own education, and they are now doing it. This was not the system in any country, but now under late capitalism, this is the reality. And it resulted in a labor market segmentation. In capitalist countries, you know, manufacturing stagnated in the 1970s and the service sector experienced unprecedented growth. Okay. The net effect was to increase the segmentation of the job market between a limited number of high-paying, high-tech jobs in industry requiring advanced specialized training, for example, computer programmers, and the increasing availability of low-paying, low-skilled jobs in such expanding service areas as fast food counters, supermarkets, and discount department stores. These are all taken from UNESCO publications, by the way. None of them are my inventions. So what is happening to the colonized countries of the former third world countries? Share of the modern GDP sector in GDP with capital-intensive technologies, higher productivity, and higher wages grew substantially, but share of the modern sector in national labor force did not experience a corresponding growth rate. So it is a problem of unemployment. As a result, young people with a modern education found it increasingly difficult to secure a good paying, stable, and secure job in the modern sector. Added to this was the spread of new communication media. Now we all know this, whose messages whetted the aspirations of people for a better life, including greater access to education. And this deschooling has been accepted by the UNESCO report. They started to talk about in the late 60s. Now you see, in 1972, a UNESCO report was published called the Four Committee report. The importance of schools, they say, in relation to other means of education is not increasing but diminishing. Its basic point was that in a fast changing world, characterized by rapidly growing and changing learning needs, and also by unacceptable growth inequalities, this is populism number one. It was essential to give attention also to strengthening other modes of education. These other modes of learning, blah, 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 soon came to be called non-formal as well as informal education. Disavowals notwithstanding, they deny, no, we use it in the developed countries as well. Non-formal education remained, in fact, glued to the poor and only limited to the developing countries. I know there are lots of people to disagree with me. Non-formal education for the colonized is the prescription the World Bank and all other international organizations came forward with. The delusion could not be exposed better. Look at their own language. They said we do this in the advanced countries as well. This is called convoluted thinking. Non-formal education, though rarely called by that name, is widely used, for example, to familiarize progressive farmers, factory workers, bank clerks, and many others, including consumers, with new technologies and new products such as computers. It is a major means by which many well-educated people continue their education in all sorts of directions. The same report continues. Not least important, non-formal education in the advanced countries enables highly trained specialists such as physicians, engineers, and scientists and top government and business managers to keep abreast of the rapidly advancing frontiers of knowledge in their respective fields. So far, so good. And they are using it for 4-year education for the children of the poor. The World Bank, UNICEF, and USAID AID, among others, endorsed non-formal education. These scholars, inspired by Ivan Illich, also welcome this non-education. It's formally speaking non-education. You simply do an algebraic transformation, you will see what comes out. As a recipe for breaking the monopoly of the formal education system. They say, revised policies placed a heavy new emphasis on basic education, which is defined not in the way Mahatma Gandhi defined, including primary schooling for children and appropriate non-formal education for out-of-school youth and adults, and a reduced priority for secondary and higher education. And now you're expecting excellent universities from here. Whatever happened to the university? The university is dead, as I said. We are already in the post-death university, posthumous university. But let me see what is happening inside the corpse. Drive towards a specialization stands in contrast to simultaneous technological integration of knowledge. This is a tendency that goes against what Professor Habibur Jaman just described. This integration effected by ICTs, communication technologies, and information does not lead to a unity of the universally oriented professor, but to the expert. The late capitalist world that we are experiencing is a world of experts, not ruled by an understanding that mirrors the world. This is borrowed from Leibniz, the great philosopher, but by a specialist who reflects nothing or a divided world at best. The specialist who knows more and more about less and less has landed on the other side of a universality. He seeks it in details, which to him mean totality. I borrow this from the German professor Jürgen Mittelstrass. So, paradox of information society is that it is masquerading information as knowledge, which it is not. It's a negation of knowledge. The distinction between universal and particular begins to fade. Not only that, and many professors you ask, 90 out of 100 would not be able to say the difference between between universal, particular, and individual. When society begins to see itself as information society, the distinction fades. Knowledge as information is disorienting. How oriented knowledge, not to be confused with the mere expert knowledge, how oriented knowledge can be achieved is not a question that can be answered by an appeal to yet more information. It is actually a paradox. The richer our stores of information and knowledge, the poorer our ability to orient ourselves. But this ability is precisely what education once stood for. So now ignorance is given the new name of information.
Sir, I'm really sorry, but you have 3 minutes left.
Okay, I'll try to finish. Education realizes the subject or reason in a symbolic order of culture and represses the ego as eruption of the imaginary. That is what usually is called natural. For Wilhelm von Humboldt, the subject tries to grasp as much of the world as is possible and tries to bind it to him as tightly as possible. The locus of orientation being lived experience, not a rarefied world. So here is Humboldt following Hegel, who says, founder of the Berlin University, knowledge is the universal expressed as a particular, at least if one considers both knowledge and experience together. Knowledge is the ability to impress experience for itself and to express its experience in itself. So whatever has happened to the claim of universality, I skip this. And let's say autonomy is already subverted in the managerial university. So now future of another illusion. The illusion is that this new university will take us to heaven. To believe that any university system may continue to be run as an essentially homogeneous system is an illusion now being installed more vigorously. Homogeneity as measure of all university affairs inevitably leads to a rampant mediocrity in the long run. University mission statements for their publicity brochures, this is from Bill Readings, share two distinctive features nowadays. On the one hand, they all claim that theirs is a unique educational institution. On the other hand, they all go to describe this uniqueness in exactly the same way. As so-called PRSP documents one showed, 120 countries have the same thing. Now, what is abjection in knowledge is called excellence. So this is a movement from the old liberal view to the new view. I'm skipping this because I have to finish. And then I will say, the university now that we are having is of the mediocre, by the mediocre, I don't know what is for the mediocre. Mediocre conditions do not necessarily exclude a high level of achievement or occasional feats of excellence, but this remains an exception. In general, mediocre conditions are a program for academic mediocrity, true to Andre Weil's law, which is called first-rate people hire first-rate people, but second-rate people hire third-rate ones. So I will not read too much of it. And with routine, now the last thing I would like to present is that this in quality assurance, evaluation, internal quality assessment, what they are going, this is an absolute reification. Who is doing this? Subjecting academic practice to standardized criteria betrays a managerial innocence of the essence of science, which lies in the discovery of the new and may come in unpredictable ways. Optimal methods cannot be laid down before the fact and cannot be limited by set rules and quality control by managers. What they are doing, they are constantly introducing new assessment tools to make teachers of them. What is happening is called degradation of teaching as a result. I'll finish in 2 slides. The scientist engaged in research becomes researcher now, becomes reified and de-individualized in specialist institutions. Research is a business specifically founded for that purpose, especially in science and technology. Research as form of life now turns into research as business, ordered in teams, projects, and alliances with the individual, taken out of research and out of teaching for that matter. With Americanization, standardized teaching becomes the norm, turns the university more and more into a high school. The teacher disappears behind the instructor in an organized bureaucracy owing to teaching requirements. However, universities are ever more in discomfort to present themselves as such. So I am finished in my concluding part. Where is the conscience of the university? Is there anything to hope in the future? I finish with this in the next one. The common endeavors of research workers and teachers require real community. The university, which was called the Universitas Literatum, the institutional totality of the various sciences, is no more than a proficient, particularly resplendent expression of community. Hence the origin of the original guild designation, Universitas. In the process, a not insignificant role fell to philosophy once upon a time, or ethics, or theology, whatever you call it, which has long felt itself to be the conscience of the university. It is the science in which the consciousness of the totality lives and has to live. Now, finally, I would say, is there a hope for us? I cannot give you any hope. I'm only raising a question. Can the whole light up again? It comes from this Latin quotation of Nicholas of Cusa, totum relucet in omnibus omnia oblique. That means everything is lighting up again and everything is everywhere. Whereas I surprisingly found that Professor Jamil Ahmed also quoted this. I will say this: from the times of early capitalism till the onset of high capitalism in the 19th century, rational discourse, if you like, you call it philosophy or ethics, concern itself above all with the unity of knowledge. A common melody is the substantive coloration of all learning was its particular concern and the essential aspect of its method and subject. Rational discourse, therefore, when doing its job, offers a moving cantus firmus. Cantus firmus is your strong, your firm foundation that provides stability and direction in which and about which the polyphony of knowledge moves. Totum relucet in omnibus omnia ubique, as said Nicholas of Cusa, who died in the early 15th century, in relation to Arabic philosophy, which both Leibniz and Hegel made unforgettable. I would probably finish with this. It is a good idea to finish at this moment. Thank you. Have I crossed my limit, time limit, Ms. Prama?
Okay. Sir, you have perfectly finished in time. Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Sorry, ma'am. It would have been great if there was no time constraint, but what can I do? Ma'am, please continue.
I skipped a few slides. Probably in the question and answer session, I can take resort to that. I forgot only one thing: the original scene of Western University. They are ungrateful. They borrowed their university models all from Arabic colleges, but up to Nicholas of Cusa in the 15th century, they recognized it. Now they don't. But the Western University that has become global and we are borrowing is already dead. We have to look for, I don't know what will happen in the next. Their time has crossed 1,000 to 800 years. Only a God can tell, not me. Thank you. What about the future? Yeah, there are lots of questions. First, let me begin with your own question, Professor Jahan. That means I'm thinking about a transitional model in the sense that whatever is happening now, I'm looking at a kind of millennial scale. Whatever happened to Plato's academy, it lasted 800 or 1,000 years. So it happened to Aristotle's one. One can contrast Aristotle and Plato to see what is the difference between a philosopher and a philosopher scientist. I will not elaborate on that. What is happening now in the last 1,000 or 800 years of Western university, it is my guess that its lifetime is over. So what we have a saying in Bengali, Mara hatir damo lakh taka, a dead elephant worth $1 million. So these dead universities will take some time to completely get wiped out like dinosaurs. But these dinosaurs where we are living, these are now being re-advertised, repackaged like multinational corporations. They are called global universities, and they are doing rankings which is preposterous. For example, this QS ranking system, which says that the ratio of foreign and national faculty, ratio of foreign students and national students, and these are the criteria which are completely mindless and senseless in the distance between advanced and non-advanced countries. Very clear. Though the world is growing faster in the fourth industrial revolution, but the global divide, if not exactly along the old lines, but again more or less along the lines of Asia, Africa, or some countries of Caribbean, Latin America, is continuing. So by ignoring these facts cavalierly, as some of us have done also in this seminar, that you have a job everywhere, I think this is very unfortunate. The very origin of the problem is in the contraction of employment and segmentation of the labor market. If we want to blatantly ignore the reality, of course, we can talk anything about it. Now, I was asked a very interesting question by Mr. Afzal Rahman, I thank him for, about Newman's ideas. In the 1850s, when Newman, who converted from Protestantism to Catholicism, he was taken to University College in Dublin, then at that time, he gave his famous lecture from which I borrowed my title, The Idea of University. I contracted it, the university as such. He says that the centerpiece of university is undergraduate education. What makes you a university, that it is a multi-faculty. You will remember when Dhaka University was founded in 1920s, it was a 3-faculty university, right? Sciences, arts, and what's called law faculty. Now we have 12 faculties or more departments. That is the first idea of university. All kinds of knowledge would be united. But what is the centerpiece? Here comes Newman's ideas. He said that centerpiece is what he called theology, but we do not have to buy his ideas. Nowadays, in a secular world, you will say it is something called ethics or something called philosophy. You use the term. I am not a particular fan of philosophy as a department. But Dhaka University, you can see, has changed over 100 years. It was supposed to be a unitary university. Now it is a supervising university, affiliating university, which it was denied in the beginning. After Pakistan, it was given 55 colleges. Now we create so-called national college, university. You know this empirical history. I'm not going to elaborate on that. Dhaka University has moved away from its mission of teaching, and it is now trying to compete with the specialized research institutes. For example, why do we have in Pakistan Institute of Development Economics? In Bangladesh, we renamed it BIDS. What is its job and what is the job of Dhaka University? University is primarily teaching and then research. But there are specialized research institutes all over the world. University is not good competitor with them. So the question is, if we lose our mission of teaching, and then the question of what we are teaching, this is the Newman's question. And there is nothing better than Newman in the last 150 years, or I would say. Then the question is, what is universal knowledge? The fact that every human being speaks. I corroborate Professor Jamil Ahmed's idea that anyone who can speak can learn. What unites all kinds of human races across gender, across races, and across religions is that they speak one language or other. Now, even mathematics, which is called the language of science, is also a language. It is a developed language, symbolic language, but Bengali, English, all natural languages. University's first task, according to Bertrand Russell, is to teach students language, nothing but. Now, in autobiographical mode, I am not going to talk much about Dhaka University. In the University of Dhaka, I learned next to nothing except language. Though I was a student in the law department, later on I learned economics and many other things. I see this in my 38 years of teaching, and if I add my student experience, 45 years of Dhaka University life, around Dhaka University, this university has gone down the drains. It is no more a university, but what it is, it did its historical function. It helped a bourgeoisie, a middle class, to develop in East Bengal, which was a demand of the time. And during the Pakistan period also we helped it. But right after Bangladesh came into being, in the name of democracy, we have totally destroyed Dhaka University as a university. So, and now we are calling fashion technology as a university. Now if you say, BUET, what is university? How can BUET be university? It is far cry from Newton's idea of university. With one faculty, and if you call that architecture is a faculty, civil engineering is a faculty, that is not what faculty is. The whole of engineering is one faculty. And if you deprive them from learning social sciences or just introduce them as some kind of supplementary courses, that is a lip service. And this hypocrisy is at the root of our educational decline. I have seen many other comments here also. One question was the future of post-COVID universities. I am not prone to predicting, I would say. What is called the fourth industrial revolution is nothing new. If you do not understand the first industrial revolution, you would not understand the fourth one. I'm not saying that it is necessary. It is not sufficient, but it is a necessary question. I will skip to the non-Western university. What is non-Western? All universities in the world today are non-Western in one sense, because they are located outside the West. But in ideas, they are all Western. All the Russian universities are no exception. So the scale at which I'm talking, I think I will be misunderstood invariably when I say I did not talk about Arabic universities. I talked about colleges. These Nizamiyas were colleges. They were colleges of theology, and there were colleges of medicine. There were colleges of other kinds of skills. So if we think that skill building is the university job, then we are dead wrong. University job is thinking. As Socrates used to say, mythologically, I don't teach you. I don't think for you. You think for yourself. I help you only to think. This is the teacher's mission throughout the world. What is now happening? I worked in American universities for 12 years. I am working in so-called private universities in Bangladesh and also in Dhaka University. I find teaching has degraded. They are giving you internal quality assessment cells. They are making you doing all kinds of labor works. There is nothing of teaching. There is only mechanical work. This in recruitment, what has happened? Why Dhaka University has gone down the drains? I say third-rate people are recruited by second-rate people. There may be exceptions. I do not want to insult everybody, but I feel that it is an insult to be a university of Dhaka, teacher of Dhaka University now. Honestly speaking, sometimes they say that why are you so smart? Why you are not in the Dhaka University? I said I'm really smart. That's why I'm not a teacher of the Dhaka University. Because it is not work. Professor Jamil Ahmad is 100% correct. There is no academic discourse in Dhaka University anymore. Whatever has happened, Pakistan has broken. Professor Jahan, you wrote the book, Failure of National Integration. But what is the success of national integration in Bangladesh? The class divide in Bangladesh today is wider than it used to be in Pakistan period. Or it used to be, I would even say, in the British period. Anyway, so this takes me beyond my reference. So finally, the question of a specialization and the relation of universal knowledge with the specialization. I am not against a specialization. I'm talking about the proper forum of. We have not even reached the liberal stage before, let alone neoliberal. What is liberal stage? In 1948, when the Universal Declaration of the United Nations was accepted, Human Rights Declaration. What did it say? Education, they divided into three kinds of types: fundamental and elementary education, technical and professional education, then higher education. All our universities are now supposed to deliver their college educations. Dhaka University has a subterfuge. We divide the university into departments and faculties, then again we divide them into halls. Dhaka Hall, Jagannath Hall, and Mohammedan Hall. They were supposed to be substitutes for colleges. Now whatever has happened to those ideas? This is an anomaly, and they are neither colleges nor halls. They are not teaching units at all. They were probably for the first decade. Then it has all collapsed. The reason for their collapse is that they were not on solid foundation, as Professor Jamil Ahmad has said. We have to talk about the foundational grade. United Nations have accepted a declaration saying that fundamental education or elementary education should be free and compulsory, etc. But what is the length of that definition? We have always deceived our people by saying that 5 years education is enough for primary education. But you, middle-class gentlemen and ladies, you would not agree to leave your child alone until they finish 12 years of schooling. And that is the universal standard of fundamental education. We have betrayed our people. Now we say that, oh, those formal modes of teaching are not enough. We need other modes. What do we need by other modes? This is what BRAC is doing. This is preposterous and a crime against the nation. I mean, the idea of the nation as a nation of equitable citizens. It is officially introducing the Pakistani theory of what you call functional inequality for development. Economic growth must create non-equality. That was Pakistani ideology. But is it worse than the Indian ones who gave the socialist pattern slogan, which Bangladesh imitated for a few years? This is all nonsense. We are living with nonsense. Man, we are calling them development ideology. Development is, I would say, what I should say, it's a scandal. It is creating a wider debate. So how can you then say universal education? Whatever has happened to universal primary education, whatever has happened to universal literacy in Bangladesh, we say, oh, Pakistan has exploited us for 23 years. But whatever happened to India? It was not exploited by China in the last 73 years. Whatever has happened to Indian basic health, and we see. So that's why I say, before talking about this, we have to talk about professional and other education. Dhaka University has completely rid itself of higher education. It has become a professional college to produce BCS officers, and it is doing the job reasonably well. The secretaries and others, with a few exceptions, all of them, with a few exceptions, I say, most of them can be characterized to be associated with the present, I would say, below potential growth of the economy, let alone equity. So now everybody is saying in the corporations, we need to introduce a course in ethics. Even medical association sometimes invites me, say, give a lecture on ethics to doctors right before the outbreak of COVID. Now, COVID has taught you a lesson in what shambles the health system is. Is it not associated with us? The United Nations in 1968 said that you must devote 6% of the GDP to education. We are devoting for the last 50 years less than 3%, 2.5%. And then we are talking about university. University has become a privileged elite institution. It is for the elite, by the elite. The problem is that this elite is mediocre elite. It doesn't even compete with world scholars. So I think we are lost in both sense. How it can be done? I would say yes. The whole may be lit up again, but you have to get it back to the ground. I'm not against the specialization, but the specialized people should be first educated, as Bertrand Russell said. You must learn language. Now you see, average graduate in Bangladesh cannot write one page of, including your vice chancellor of the university, cannot write one correct page of Bengali. Forget about English. And we are masquerading with English medium instruction. What gives you that right? Is it not a violation of the War of Independence? As if Bengali cannot be the medium of instruction in Bangladesh universities, where it could be. Then you blabber about making it a UN official language. You see the level of idiocy involved there, let alone hypocrisy. I'm appalled. Thank you very much for the time. Can I respond in 1 minute, Appa? Just 1 minute to Mr. Khandakar's remark. I am saying that primary education or fundamental education is for everyone, though they have not actually delimited it. It depends on country to country. But let's say it is available, it should be available to everybody, free and compulsory. I'm talking about 1948 position. But the next stage of education, professional and technical education, they said it should be available to everybody without any reference to merit. Very interesting. But higher education should be limited only on the basis of merit, without discrimination. So there are progressive relaxation of conditions. So nobody is saying that right of education, if we say we have a right to education, how much education is education? I'm saying that universal rule from historical experience is that Dadosh Borsho Guru Grihe Vidya Adhyayan. Even it is true, because human lifespan is no more than 100 years. So if we say that student life would be at least 12 years of schooling, or student should attain age of maturity at 18, that should be the compulsory final education. Then technical education should be available to anybody, whoever is willing. You cannot raise the question of merit. Then afterwards, the question of merit comes. So I would say there is a profound misunderstanding by talking about Spivak and others. I know both Spivak and Sarsen, and this is completely, I would say, a misleading statement. One does not necessarily understand finance if one understands physics. That's a complete wrong statement. I'm sorry to say this.
To be, can I